Albert Einstein was the greatest scientist that the world has ever known. But just as so much of so-called history has been fabricated in order to brainwash the public into believing myths that serve the parasitic controllers, so was Albert Einstein created into a mythic figure in order to support those ends. Unfortunately, many generations of trusting students have been brainwashed into believing in this fraud, and hailed Einstein as a shining example of scientific genius. He was nothing of the sort. Einstein was a total fraud. Let's take a look at his timeline. 1700 Newton predicts the deflection of light around the sun, something Einstein plagiarized as his 1911 prediction without even mentioning, much less citing, Newton. 1801 Johann Georg von Soldner publishes his predictions which Einstein plagiarizes as his own predictions 114 years later, never citing Soldner in his 1915 paper. 1827 78 years before Einstein gets credit for it, Robert Brown in Scotland explains Brownian movement, yet Einstein never even cited him. 1878 James Maxwell in Scotland publishes Special Theory of Relativity in Encyclopaedia Britannica, which Einstein then publishes as his own in 1905. Without ever even citing Maxwell, it seems incomprehensible that Einstein could have copied an article from an encyclopedia, submitted it as his own work, and never get questioned by the hundreds of professors and publishers who must have reviewed it. 1879, March 14 Einstein born in Wittenberg, Germany. 1887 Michelson-Morley experiment suggests there is no ether, an observation made by Einstein in his 1905 papers in which he never even cited Michelson or Morley. 1888 Heinrich Hertz publishes his paper on the photoelectric effect, a paper which Einstein failed to cite. 1889 George Fitzgerald in Ireland publishes his paper about the theory of relativity, a paper which Einstein never even cited, even though Fitzgerald's numerous collaborators did cite him. 1890 Ludwig Boltzmann of Austria and Josiah Gibbs of the U.S. developed the Boltzmann constant. 1892 Hendrik Lorentz in the Netherlands publishes the Lorentz transformations. 1895 At age 16, Einstein fails a simple entrance exam to an engineering school in Zurich, Switzerland. 1896 At age 17, Einstein becomes a high school dropout, his German citizenship is revoked, and he enrolls in the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich. 1898 Paul Gerber in Germany publishes the exact equations in an Allendorf-Physik, also in Science of Mechanics, a book that Einstein is known to have studied, which Einstein publishes 17 years later in 1915 as his Perihelion Motion of Mercury, in exactly the same journal, with no cites to Gerber, claiming that he was in the dark, only to confess in 1922 his crime. Under pressure. 1898 Poincaré in France wrote the paper on the theory of relativity, which never mentions Einstein, which Einstein plagiarizes as one of his 1905 papers without ever citing Poincaré. 1900 Max Planck and Wilhelm Wien of Germany developed the quantum theory, which Einstein plagiarizes as his light quantum paper in 1905, never even citing either Planck or Wien. 1901 At age 22, after 5 years at Swiss Federal Polytechnic School, Einstein graduates with the lowest grade point average in the class, becomes a Swiss citizen, and gets the lowest ranking position an engineer could get in the patent office, technical assistant. 1902 Einstein sires his first mental mushroom, an illegitimate daughter Liesel, who believed to have had Down syndrome and was put up for adoption. 1903 Alonso de Brito publishes E=mc 2 inches at, a scientific magazine known to be read by Einstein, which he later claimed as his own work, never citing de Brito. 1904 Einstein sires his only normal child, Hans Albert, whose main claim to fame seems to have been to keep up his subscription to Applied Mechanics Review for 20 years. 1904 Friedrich Haysen Earl of Germany, citing J.J. Thomson of England and W. Kaufmann of Sweden, publishes E=mc 2 in the very same journal as Einstein plagiarizes it as his own in 1905, never citing any of the three. 1905 Philip Edward Anton von Leonard, under whom Einstein's wife studied, received a Nobel Prize for discovering the photoelectric effect, which Einstein then completely plagiarizes the same year, presenting it as his paper, with no references to Leonard. June 5, 1905, Poincaré publishes Sur la dynamique de l'électron, naming the Lorentz transformations after Lorentz, and 25 days later, on June 30, Einstein, failing to even cite Poincare or Lorentz, presents it as his theory of relativity. 1905 at age 26, while still a low-level technical assistant at the patent office, he publishes 4 groundbreaking essays in the field of theoretical physics and quantum mechanics in an Alan der Physik, gaining him a Ph.D. from the University of Zurich and worldwide support from Zionists. He includes his wife Marity's name on the papers, who is rumored to have done all his math for him, who he gave all the prize money. 1907 J. Prex says of Einstein, ridiculous twist of logic. Perhaps it will prove possible to test this theory using bodies whose energy content is variable to a high degree, for example, salts of radium. That such an experiment lies beyond the realm of possible experience. 1909 at age 30, 4 years after getting his Ph.D., this genius is still a technical assistant at the patent office, so world jury arranges to promote him to associate professor at Zurich University. 1910 Einstein sires his second mental mushroom, Eduardo, who dies in a sanatorium in 1965. 1919, November 7, London Times begins the Jew disinformation campaign, heralding Einstein as a genius. 1915, November 20, David Hilbert presents his paper in Berlin, citing Marcel Grossmann, including precisely the same field equations that Einstein presents as his own equations 5 days later, 2 weeks after it was known that Einstein had received a copy of Hilbert paper and that Hilbert hadn't received a copy of Einstein paper. Dingle repudiates the special theory of relativity in 1972-1915. November 25, Einstein presents his paper and publishes the general theory of relativity based on the mathematics of Marcel Grossmann and Bernhard Riemann, first to develop a sound non-Euclidean geometry, which is the basis of all mathematics used to describe relativity. 1921 Einstein first visit to the U.S. to promote Zionism. 1922 Einstein receives a Nobel Prize concerning the photoelectric effect, something he plagiarized from Heinrich Hertz, but who Einstein never even cites. 1932, December 9, Einstein was denied a visa to visit the U.S. because of his communist connections. 1955, April 18, Einstein dies. 1972, Herbert Dingle refutes the special theory of relativity which Einstein plagiarized from him in 1915. 1993, Peter Beckmann writes that special relativity will eventually be dismissed. 1995, the global positioning satellite works fine, in spite of Einsteinians' concerns that they ignored Einstein theories. 1998, December 21, Tom van Flandern publishes in Physics Letters that the speed of gravity must be at least 20 billion times faster than the speed of light, disproving Einstein theories. 1999, Time magazine puts Einstein on the front cover as Person of the Century. Even though he was an American, he was an enemy foreign agent. The American public never viewed Einstein as even one of their most favorite 100 people of the year, much less the century. And the last picture we want on our coffee tables is one of a lying, plagiarizing demagogue. 2000, Anita Renfani proves that Einstein theory about the constant speed of light is wrong. The Einstein myth has become so ingrained in popular thought that many of the current generations will be loath to part with it. It does make a terrific story. A student whom his teachers thought would not amount to anything, a sloppy dresser who abhorred wearing socks or even neatly combing his hair, should later be revealed to be the greatest scientist of all time. A solitary genius who, without any significant help from anybody, rearranged the universe. Like most fine stories that sound too good to be true, the Einstein myth is really too good to be true. The Nobel Prize-winning chemist Linus Pauling once said on a completely unrelated topic that it takes a generation before people will accept a truly new idea. Current generations, weaned on the Einstein myth, will not bear to part with it. Women and men of newer generations, not weaned on the myth, willing to investigate the evidence for themselves, and not wedded to any ideology or point of view, will approach the issue of Einstein authorship of the special theory of relativity and the formula E=mc with fresh eyes. The Einstein hoax consists of maintaining the quasi-religious belief that the phenomena associated with velocity and gravitation cannot be understood by ordinary men using their common sense. It can only be understood in terms of mathematics performed by initiates who possess the prerequisite degrees. Whether it is recognized or not, all of the essentials of a religion are present. There is a deity in the form of Dr. Einstein, who, like most of the men who have had that role thrust on them over the centuries, probably did not seek or even relish it. It has an established but unproven set of truths which were revealed by that deity. Finally, it is protected by selected defenders of the faith who, in this case, act through the peer review process to ensure that heresy in any form is never published. A primary motive for the maintaining of the Einstein hoax is rather obvious. Money. Society expends a large sum supporting this priesthood through tuition paid by parents and grants by government and industry. The donors believe they are paying for the teaching of the young. However, that teaching is mostly done by graduate students who are seeking their own degrees. The established possessors of the necessary degrees spend most of their time in research because, not only is that activity more interesting, it serves to advance their tenure-protected careers. Should special and/or general relativity be shown to be fundamentally flawed, the careers of relativists, most cosmologists, and those working on quantum gravity and/or unified field theory will have been wasted. The publication of special relativity provided a golden opportunity for the majority of the academic community. Under the interpretations of nature provided by special relativity, the door was opened for the majority of its members who were without the talent required to understand its workings. At the same time, those with the necessary talent needed to understand reality instinctively recognized that contradictions were implicit in special relativity and could not accept the subject as it was presented. Teachers of special relativity report that a significant percentage of intelligent and mathematically skilled students cannot master the subject. The inability to accept special relativity, as presented, effectively eliminates individuals with a strong sense of reality, which by another name is called common sense, from the ranks of those who acted as advisors to PhD candidates and from the roles of those who perform the peer reviews which determine what is published in scientific journals. As a result, a selection process was gradually put in place which ensured that only material which did not threaten the validity of special and general relativity was published. Material which appeared to be a threat, no matter how powerfully presented and how intellectually and observationally valid, was effectively squelched. On the other hand, material which supported special and general relativity, no matter how trivial or absurd, was readily published. Once this point was reached, it was possible to make the claim that the subject had